Today is November 19th. It's the 324th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. On this day in 1863, President Abraham Lincoln delivers a short address at the dedication of the military cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The address is thought dull and commonplace by some at the time. The very same address that we have come to know as one of the greatest speeches ever delivered in American history, the Gettysburg Address. Sure, everyone loves you when you're dead, so perhaps Abraham Lincoln's words are recounted with greater significance due to his untimely death at the hands of the assassin John Wilkes Booth. But in fact, President Lincoln's cursory remarks at Gettysburg on this day in 1863 mark a crucial turning point in the Civil War and in the life of this great experiment in democracy, the United States of America. Lincoln isn't feeling well on this day. He's a bit under the weather on the train ride up from Washington, D.C. Soon after his return to Washington, Lincoln will be diagnosed with a mild case of smallpox. Lincoln is also a bit of a surprise guest at the dedication ceremony. Renowned orator Edward Everett is scheduled to deliver the main address on this day. President Lincoln is invited to speak, but he's not expected to attend. He has said he won't leave Washington until the war is over. And while it is the dedication of a military cemetery, it is just the dedication of a military cemetery. But for Lincoln, the dedication ceremony at Gettysburg is an opportunity to rally a dispirited North and send a message to the South. In the mid-1800s, there's a growing divide in the nation over the issue of slavery. It's not the only issue dividing the country, but it's the main issue that sees slave-owning states, primarily in the South, banding together in opposition against abolitionist states in the North. The issue comes to a head with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. Lincoln wins the election with only 40% of the popular vote, elected by Northern Electoral College votes. No Southern states vote for Lincoln. Immediately upon his election, some of those Southern states announce they plan to secede from the nation. By his inauguration day in March 1861, 7 Southern states have seceded from the Union. And just a month later, in April 1861, the Civil War begins when the South attacks Fort Sumter near Charleston, South Carolina. Lincoln assembles a Union army to counter the rebellion. The Battle of Gettysburg, 2 years into the war in July 1863, is the bloodiest battle in the entire Civil War. Though Gettysburg is a clear victory for the Union, Northerners are horrified by the extent of the slaughter. Support for the conflict that Northerners hoped would end at Gettysburg dwindles when they realize the bloodshed is only going to continue. Soon after the battle, there are draft riots in New York City when the federal government tries to enforce the recently passed conscription law to rebuild the ranks of the Union Army. President Lincoln needs to bolster support for the cause of unity, and the dedication ceremony for the military cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, provides the perfect setting to remind the people of the nation what they are fighting for. Edward Everett speaks first. His lofty and inspiring oration drones on for 2 hours and would probably be lost to history if it wasn't for the book containing his speech that he publishes in 1864. Lincoln's words, delivered on this day, are remembered because of their brevity. 272 words in all. He speaks for just over 2 minutes. And while the exact words he speaks are lost to history, the ideas of the Gettysburg Address and the most important elements are recorded by a number of sources. There are 5 different copies that Lincoln handwrites himself, 2 before this day and 3 written afterwards, though they all differ slightly from each other. And they differ slightly from the records of his short speech on this day in Gettysburg, which are taken down by hand by the reporters present, who pass their versions along to their publishers, who publish President Lincoln's brief remarks in newspapers across the country in the days and weeks that follow. The version of the Gettysburg Address considered the official version is the handwritten copy Lincoln signs and gives to Colonel Alexander Bliss, which he writes months after this day in 1863. Lincoln begins his speech by referencing the Declaration of Independence. 70 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Lincoln refers to the Declaration of Independence rather than the Constitution, the founding principles and ideals of the Union, rather than the organizing document of the government. Southerners point to the 10th Amendment as their justification for secession, that all powers not given to the federal government are given to the states, and that, as in 1776, they have the right to separate from a government they deem tyrannical. But in the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln makes the point that the Union predates the nation, that it is the people, not the states, that came together to form the United States. The Civil War is not a war between two nations as far as Lincoln is concerned. It is simply a rebellion, and in a way, a continuation of the Revolution. The people may leave the nation, but the states cannot. As far as Lincoln is concerned, there can be no such thing as secession from the United States. The United States of America is an experiment, and the world is waiting for America to fail. The nation created by the founders 87 years earlier faces its greatest test, and Abraham Lincoln endeavors to hold it together, to maintain the Republic and renew its cause. In his Gettysburg Address delivered on this day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln not only honors the soldiers who gave their lives so the nation may live, but he also gives purpose for the nation, that of democracy, equality, and individual freedom. Quote, "From those honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we were highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth." There are 42 days left in the year.